Hello my lovely friends, and welcome to another video, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Shelby and I make bookish content every Wednesday, so if you love all things books, then try hitting that subscribe button down below and let's get into today's video. Let's go ahead and talk about what this video is all about today. We're going to talk about my favorite books of 2024, and I've been seeing a big trend of people just kind of discussing their top 24 books of 2024. Of course, you can probably piece that together, but 2024, so they do 24 books. And I was originally going to do that, and that's why I came up with a list of 24 books. But I also really want to focus more heavily on my favorites, my favorites of the year. So I'm going to give you the list of all 24 books that I have, but more specifically when I get to my top 10, we'll dive a little bit deeper into those books and why they were my favorite. So let's go ahead and get into it. But before we do, if you have not gotten yourself comfy and cozy, maybe go ahead and do that now. Get yourself a beverage. I have gone ahead and made myself a hot chocolate today because it is winter. It is cold outside and I wanted something warm and delicious. So I've got a nice hot chocolate here. I get this hot chocolate from Target actually, and I think it's their it's not a dark chocolate, but it's like a chocolatey chocolate because I like mine to taste really chocolatey. And then I put some marshmallows in here. So let's go ahead and get into it. I am very excited. I had a very, very good reading year, and my reading year is not over. It is not over until it is January 1st. So I'm still reading quite a few books, but so far this year, I think I've read close to 80 books, which is really big for me. That's actually crazy to say. I haven't read that many books in a long time. So I have had quite a selection to choose from. A lot of the books that I read this year were really good ones, but I also had some flops. So I'm going to go ahead and just list off the top 24 books. But once I get to the top 10, that's when I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into those books because those were my absolute favorites of the year. So we'll start off with 24, which was If You Had Been With Me. This one I saw going viral everywhere on TikTok, and I decided I would pick it up because all you kept seeing was people crying. And that one was by Laura Nolan. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I'm really bad with pronouncing names, so forgive me. I also have Out on a Limb. This one was a really cute book, and I liked the fact that it dealt with, something that you don't hear about very often, because the main character has a disability, and I believe also the author, who is Anna Boehm Young, she also has the same disability as the main character, which I thought was really cool. The Housemaid, and that was by Frida McFadden. If you didn't know, I believe that is also getting turned into a movie. Then we have The Reappearance of Rachel Price, and this was by Holly Jackson, and I really loved this book. I wish I could have put it lower down on the list, but there's just too many to choose from. So this one I had been a little bit hesitant to pick up because I love A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I love that series so much, but I think it's her other two books. Is it two books or one book? I can't even remember. Specifically, Five Survive. That's what I'm thinking of, I believe. I did not enjoy that book at all. I really didn't. I really wish I hadn't picked that book up. But I really enjoyed The Reappearance of Rachel Price. It is very, I guess, reminiscent of kind of this eerie underlining tone in the book that I kind of got from Good Girl's Guide to Murder, yet there was fun. It kept you guessing the entire time, and you just want to know what happened and why Rachel Price just magically reappeared after being missing for so long. So if you haven't checked that book out, I do highly recommend. The next book on my list, and again, another book I wish I could have put in my top 10, but this is The Lightning Thief. This book I was recommended quite often by quite a few of you on my channel, and I wasn't sure about it. I had heard of it, never read it growing up, which is quite surprising, but I think I was very much in my Harry Potter era and I didn't care about much else. But I finally picked up that series and I read the first 2 books. I haven't finished the series yet, so I will be continuing that and doing a reading vlog once I pick those books back up. So look forward to seeing that. But I read The Lightning Thief and I fell in love instantly. The characters are so lovable and it's such just an easy, fun read and you just feel like you're on the absolute best adventure. So I loved that book so much. That was so nice to read this year. Another thriller on the list. I think I read quite a few thrillers this year. But this one is called None of This Is True. This is by Lisa Jewell. And this book was really interesting. Another book that I just kind of kept seeing like populate everywhere. And I figured, let's give it a try. I liked the idea of it being kind of more along the lines of like a podcast-esque way of telling the story. And I find books like that really, really interesting. The first experience I had of something similar to that was Daisy Jones and the Six. And I actually listened to that as an audiobook. And what's really cool with that is each character is, has its own actor. So every person is portrayed by a different actor, so it really kind of makes you feel like it's something that you're listening to, almost like a radio show. And I listened to None of This Is True as an audiobook and it gave me the exact same feel, so I highly recommend this if you haven't picked it up. And it's also kind of wild. Next book on my list is Hello Stranger, and this is by Catherine Center. Now, this is my first Catherine Center book, but I know that she has quite a lot of good reads out there. And for my first one by her, this one was so good. I enjoyed this. I also learned a lot because I did not know that the main character, she ends up going through something pretty scary. She ends up having to have surgery, and after having this surgery, something ends up happening to her. And I didn't know that this was a real thing. But basically she has what you call face blindness, and it basically means you look at people and you don't really see a face. It's almost kind of like puzzle pieces, but they don't really match up. And I think that's just like the craziest thing. Like, I had no idea that even existed. But it kind of talks about that and her journey of just trying to navigate this new life. She's also a painter and she is a portrait artist. So imagine having to draw portraits and you can't really decipher a face. That's wild. So I definitely really enjoyed that book. And I'm excited to pick up more Catherine Center books in this coming year. So we'll see what we get into. The next book on my list is called Ready or Not, and this is by Kara Bostone. This book was so cute. I think really, really good and such a fast, easy read. And it basically follows a young woman who ends up having a baby with a stranger that she obviously met, and her just kind of navigating what that's going to look like for her in her life. And yeah, it was a good time. Very easy read. I think I read this book in like a day or 2 days. It was really, really nice. Next book that I have on my list was actually a buddy pick read by my friend Jessica. I've talked about it many times, but we do a buddy pick throughout the year. And we alternate the months in which we pick a book. And this time it was her pick. And she picked a book called Counting Samara or Samira. I'm not sure how you quite pronounce it, so I apologize for mispronouncing this name. But it's by an author named Amal Awad. I'm butchering this really badly. Anyways, this one was really cute, and it basically kind of follows this young lady. I believe she is Muslim, if I'm not mistaken, and just kind of what that looks like in terms of marriage and navigating life. And I thought that was really cool and really nice to see something other than what I know, like kind of diving into other like cultures. Next book on my list, I really wish this could have been in the top 10, guys. Like, but this one was House on the Cerulean Sea, and this was by TJ Colon, and this book was really cute. I had wanted to read this one for quite some time and didn't know too much about it, although I did know that there was some magical elements to the book. But I ended up loving this book so much, and I do need to pick up the other book that has come out, but it was so cute and actually quite surprising. I did not expect there to be like a subplot of like a romance in it, which I thought was really nice. So that was such a cute, like, if you're looking for a cute, cozy read, this one is that read for you. Like, this is very cozy, very cute, very easy to read. It keeps you entertained. It's just, the characters are lovable. It's just perfect. I really loved this book. Now, this next book on my list, this one was my buddy pick for like July or something like that. And I had wanted to read this book for quite some time. And for whatever reason, I tried to start it once and I never got very far. I think I got like 2 pages in and then I put it down. I don't know why, but I just felt like I needed to know what the hype was all about. And this is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. And this book was crazy. But I will say, once we started getting towards the end, I already saw where it was going. I called it. And I was still shocked. I was still shocked. But this was such a fun read. And it basically just follows our main character, who actually was not the person I thought was going to be the main character. Because how it's kind of set up and told in the synopsis is we have this young woman who's now in a psych ward because she killed her husband. We do not realize what journey we're about to go on, but this doctor who works in the hospital now takes her on as a patient, because the secret here is she, since killing her husband, has not opened her mouth and said a word, and he's very determined to get her to talk. And the plot twist that was in this book was crazy. I did end up seeing it coming, but it was crazy when it was revealed. So I very, very much enjoyed this book. And if you haven't read it yet and you've been contemplating reading it, or if it sounds remotely interesting to you at all, I highly recommend you pick it up. This is one of those books that I feel like if you thought about it, it's worth the read. The next one on my list is Carrie, and this is by Stephen King. I got into my Stephen King era this time, and I am loving it. This is so fun to pick up his books because I just don't know where it's going to go and what's going to happen, but I know something crazy is going to happen in it. And I read 3 of his books this year, so I've got tons more to read, and we actually started collecting quite a few of his books. So I have some already out there on the bookshelf waiting for me to pick them up. But Carrie was actually surprisingly a really fun read for me. I had already seen the movie, so I knew what to expect with it, but reading the actual book itself was still 10 times better, and I enjoyed this book so much. Stephen King, I don't know what he knows, but he knows it, and he does writing so well. So the next book that's on the list is The Great Gatsby, and this is by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I had read this book in high school, but I mean, I was in high school and I really didn't care about this story. So it was really fun to reread this book and actually feel like I was immersed in the story. I also did not realize how short the book was. For whatever reason, when I was in school, it felt like this book was really long. It just felt like it was a big book, and I guess that's just because I just didn't care about it at the time. But I really enjoyed that book. I also ended up watching the movie after I read it, and it's just such a good story and has such a great meaning behind it, and it is also quite a sad story. It's just, yeah, one of those classics that's worth reading. So the next book that I have on my list is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and this one took me by surprise, hence why it's very close to my top 10. But this one was so cute. I had wanted to read this book for a while yet again, and I finally decided to pick it up in November, and I'm so happy that I did. We've come to the top 10. So we're going to start off, and I do have some of these books physically here, so I'll put them up when we talk about them. But also some of these books were read either as an audiobook or a e-read. Now this first book was an audiobook, and this was an Emily Henry book, and it is Funny Story. This is probably one of my absolute favorite Emily Henry books. Yeah, just hands down. This one was so fun. Literally, it starts off just like a funny story. I wouldn't even be able to, it just felt like this is a comedy. Like, I feel like I'm watching a comedy. This can't be real. This couldn't be actually happening to a real person, which granted, this isn't a real person, but this, if this has ever happened to a real person, that's absolutely insane. But it basically starts off with this young lady who is our main character, and she's engaged to this high to do, fancy, rich guy. That's what I'm gonna call him because I can't remember his name. Sorry, he's also unimportant to me. But he has a best friend, and they go on this his bachelor party, and when he comes back, he basically tells his fiance, "Hey, I'm actually in love with my best friend," which his best friend is someone that he grew up with for forever. So she's more in like his element of like the hierarchy of incomes and things like that and what they've been raised with. And her boyfriend and our main character end up living together because the fiance kicks her out. And it's all about that and them just navigating these breakups. And it's just such a good time, but ultimately it is a beautiful story. So I loved Funny Story, and I actually want to reread that book. I need to go out and buy it, really, because that's one of those that I want to have in my collection for sure. And Emily Henry is a very hit or miss author for me, which is sad to say, but it is the truth. So I was really happy that I ended up really loving this book. And I think I found this book at a time where I was really struggling with reading. Like, I was having a hard time reading books. So I was happy to find that. So number 9 on my list. This book was so good. This book was so good. So this is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. And I hadn't read any Abby Jimenez books before. This was my first one. And I know that you are meant to read the other books before that. I just didn't know before I picked this book up. This was a buddy read for June. And it just felt like such a summer read, especially looking at the cover. I mean, that's a beautiful cover. But I ended up picking this book up and falling in love with it. I had to annotate it. Like, I've never annotated a book ever, and I had to annotate this book. Like, this book was so good, and there's just so many, like, great quotes. I love this book. So it basically follows our main character who is a nurse, and she likes to run away. And she runs away to, I don't actually remember what town they're in or where they're at, but they run off, her and her best friend, to work at another hospital for a little while. They kind of bounce around every couple of months to a new place. And that has a lot to do with some of the more deep-rooted issues that our main character has that gets unveiled to us as the book goes on. But just how the book starts is so comical because it's a Reddit post, and I knew instantly from that I was just going to love it. So I don't want to reveal too much because this is also, like I said, a book that you should read after you've read her other, I think it's 2 other books, which I plan to do this coming year. And then I'll reread Just for the Summer because I can. But yeah, so this was such a good book. It deals with a lot of heavier topics or heavier underlying topics, but it is such a good read and really worth it. I would just say pay attention because I do think that there are, I want to say, trigger warnings. I could be wrong. I'm just trying to double check. Yeah, so in the beginning, she does have like a whole thing where she talks about like the trigger warnings and stuff like that. So I would read that before you decide to officially pick up the book and just make sure that it's right for you. But it is very much a good book. I think I ended up crying after I read that book. And I did a whole video on that. I can't remember what it is, but if I can remember it and I find it, I will link it for you guys so you can see what it is. But moving on to my next book that's on my list. We've got The Alchemist. Now, this book, I know this book is pretty big. Like, I've seen it quite often, and it's, I think, it, like, considered a classic as well, if I'm not mistaken. But my husband Anthony has had this book for a little while, had it on the bookshelf, thought that this would be a book that I might be able to get into, and I was like, I'll pick it up. It's a short read. It's very small. I didn't know anything about the book, and guess what? It made it to my top 10. Like, I loved that book so much. I felt like I took so many things away from it. And it basically just follows like this. I think he's like a little like shepherd boy. Not little, like he's a young man who's like this shepherd boy. And he ends up like selling his like flock of sheep and in hopes of finding this treasure. And it basically is all about talking about like your purpose and things like that in life. And I just thought it was a really, really good book. And it really kind of just dissected and made things plain for me to understand and relate it to my life. So if you haven't read it, I think it is definitely a book worth reading. Now, the next book that's on my list is a nonfiction read, which I had a goal of 5 nonfictions for the year. Didn't think I was going to make it, but I ended up doing it, which I'm very happy about. And this one was The Third Gilmore Girl. And this was by Kelly Bishop. If you don't know anything about Gilmore Girls, you need to catch up. Go watch it. It's on Netflix. It's such a good show. And this book is about the third Gilmore Girl, which is the grandma in Gilmore Girls. And I just thought this was so good. Basically, it talks about Kelly Bishop and her life and just kind of how she got to where she is and how she got to the role of playing Emily on Gilmore Girls. And I thought it was just so good. I actually listened to this as an audiobook and I loved it because she narrated it. I always think these are better when they are the ones narrating their own story because you really relate to it a lot more, or you really, I guess you believe it a little bit more because they are kind of being transported back in time, and the emotions that they feel and everything with the stories that they're telling, you can feel it. So I really enjoyed this book. I think it is just, she's lovely. And fun fact, Kelly Bishop is not her actual name. If you read the book, you'll find out what her real name is and the story behind why her name is Kelly Bishop now. But it's such a good book. Next book on my list is another classic. I had a moment of reading classics. I think I read this book the same time I read The Great Gatsby, but this one is Rebecca, and this is by Daphne du Maurier. I hope I said that right. Very fancy name, very beautiful name. But if you did not know, again, I'm a big Taylor Swift fan over here. This book, if you did not know, is the basis for Taylor Swift's song Tolerated. And once I knew that, I was like, I have to read this book. And I loved this book so much. This book was so good. It basically just follows this young lady. I can't remember the time period this is set in, but let's just say the 50s. I could be completely wrong on that, but we'll say 50s for now. And she is working for this woman, and she's very much not happy where she's at. And she meets this older, not old, but older gentleman, and he is wealthy. They end up getting married. She becomes the new Mrs. of the home because he was previously married to a woman named Rebecca. And it just kind of tells the story of our main character, who goes unnamed. Like, she does not have a name. Throughout the entire book, she has no name, which is pretty crazy because I thought Rebecca was her. No, but it is such a crazy ride, and we kind of go through the story of this young woman kind of being haunted by Rebecca's presence. Even though she is no longer here, she is very much felt in this home and the people that knew her. And we kind of get the revealing of what happened to Rebecca and all this other stuff, and it's just such a good book. It is so good. So I highly recommend reading this book as well. The next book that is on my list is Babel, and this is by R.F. Kuang. This was a surprise read for me. I was wanting to pick this up for a little while. We actually, Anthony and I, attempted to read this ourselves, like together. We were going to listen to the audiobook of it. We started it. I couldn't get into it, so we stopped and we both read it separately. So he ended up reading this one, and then once he was done, I went ahead and picked it up, and I fell in love with this book. R.F. Kuang's writing is so good. Like, I feel like she really thinks through her story. She has a very clear understanding of what the plot is, and she knows exactly how to write a book. This does have a lot of historical facts mixed into it, even though it is very much a fictional read, and the story is kind of based around magic, which is really cool. So this gave me very much reminiscence of Harry Potter, but more of like an adult version of Harry Potter. Does it take place in Cambridge? It takes place in Oxford, and we start off where we meet our main character, Robin. I love Robin so much. But we meet him, and he is in China, and there is a plague going around, and we have this random man who just comes and kind of rescues him with no explanation whatsoever. I learned very quickly, I guessed it, I was right. I learned who this man was and why he was rescuing him. And this book was just so good. She does such a good job of, I think, depicting different characters from different backgrounds and different... Guys, I'm going to keep going, because if you would have just seen what just happened, that would have been embarrassing. Anyways, why does this happen to me? This is like the second time this has ever happened to me. All right, anyways. She just does a really good job of depicting the characters in different backgrounds, and it was just really such a good read, and also heartbreaking that it did pull at my heartstrings. But overall, love this book. She has a new book coming out in 2025 that I cannot wait to read. So hopefully that one does not hurt as bad as this one did. But it is also a big boy book. This is I think the second biggest read that I had this year, I believe. Yeah, this one is this one is 542 pages. So that was a pretty big book for me. I think on average, most books are like 300 and some odd pages. So I wasn't sure if I was going to get into it and be able to finish it, but I did. All right. Next book on my list is The Ministry of Time. And this book was so good. This book was so, so good. I'm not even going to try and butcher this poor author's name, so I'm just going to put it down below. But I think this was her debut novel, and this one was such an interesting plot, like such an interesting idea, as the element of time travel. And I love books with like little elements like that, but we take people like from years and years and years ago that are ultimately going to die and bring them to the future, and they have like this whole mission that they go on, and there's a love story that's mixed in. This book was just so good and so cute, and the ending really got me good, and I just kind of really hope and wish and pray that maybe our main character could... I don't want to spoil anything, but I just really loved the love story between our main characters. Next book on my list, this was one of the first books that I read this year. This was the first book I read this year. That was a 5-star read for me. And I ultimately really thought that this was going to be my #1 book of the year, but there's another one that took its place, but that's okay. That is Ready Player One. And this is by Ernest Cline. This book, I watched the movie. The movie was good, but this is better. I'm not going to even explain to you why this is better. Just pick up the book and read it. If you've watched Ready Player One and you enjoyed it, then pick up the book and read it. Because there's so many things that happen in the book that you just don't get to experience in the movie. There's also, I just think the storytelling of it is just way better than what we can get in the movie. The movie has to be condensed down into this tiny, like, short form of the book. So we miss out on a lot of details and a lot of things that happen in it. And I just feel like this is just like you're reading a video game. That you're reading a video game. That's action-packed, fun. Just go read the book. Go read the book. If you haven't read Ready Player One, go read the book. I've had people comment saying things like, why would I read it when I've already watched? Just go read it. That's it. That's all I have to say. All right, so down to the wire, last two books. So my runner-up for my favorite book of 2024 was a non-fiction. I had not seen that coming at all. But I have learned my reading taste for nonfictions are definitely like biography kind of things. Or like people telling their story. I love that. I really do. The informal type books, the books that you read that like are meant to teach you things, they're good. They're not my favorite. I don't love those as much, but I do love a good memoir. I do. And this one is Dinner for Vampires, Life on a Cult TV Show by Bethany Jo Luntz. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Sorry. But I did not realize, for one, that this was her book. I had seen the cover a lot and I just didn't recognize her for some reason. And the title is just so like, what? Like, what is this book even about? I could not understand it. But guys, this book was so good. If you don't know who this author is, she is actually the actress from One Tree Hill who plays... Why did I just forget her name? What's her name? Who plays Haley, and that is Lucas's best friend. I love One Tree Hill. I randomly started watching One Tree Hill after my stepmom got me into it, and I just fell in love with it. The earlier seasons are definitely my favorite. But she kind of talks about her life and being in an actual cult while also being in this extremely popular TV show of the time. And I thought that this was just such an interesting read and actually kind of crazy to kind of hear the mindset of a person that has been in a cult and them realizing that they're in a cult, but also how well they convince themselves that they're not and everything is normal and fine. I just thought this book was so good. So if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend that you pick it up. And I also listened to this as the audiobook, and she also narrates this, so it is so well read, and it's a good time. So if you are looking for your next nonfiction read, your next audiobook, make this one your choice for sure. All right, drum roll please, because we're about to get into my top book, my favorite book of 2024. Can you guess? Can you guess what it is? Can you guess who the author is? If you think you know what my favorite book of 2024 is, drop it in the comments now, and let's see if you're right. If you were correct, I will like your answer. Pause the video now, drop the comment. Ready? Ready for the grand reveal? My favorite book of 2024 was none other than 11/22/63 by Stephen King. Oh my god. This book, I love this book so much, and I love Stephen King. I love his writing. I think his writing is phenomenal, and this was definitely, I think, different than what I was expecting based off of what I kind of know to be his writing. And what I guess what I'm trying to say is this was not like a crazy, scary, or weird kind of book. It didn't have like that same element that Carrie did, although the writing was top tier. The writing was top tier. Let me just explain a little bit about what this book is about, but of course, let's address the elephant in the room. This guy was the biggest book I read all year. He is very, very big, very thick. I forget. I think this is like 800 and something pages. I want to go back and reread this book. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, so this is 849 pages. Biggest book all year. But if you don't know too much about this book, this one basically follows our main character. One basically follows our main character, Jack, and he lives in this town, and there's a diner there, and the guy that works at the diner calls him up, and he's like, hey, Jack, I need you to come down to the diner now. This is an emergency. Get down here. And he comes down to the diner, and he's like, what's going on? And Al's the owner of the diner. Al's like, hey, man, I need your help. And Al's not looking too good, okay? Al's looking pretty bad. He actually looks like he's about to kick it. So Jack's like, what on earth is going on? Because just the other day I saw you and you looked fine. Cool, great. We get over that. Jack is like, follow me. I got to show you something. I need your help. All right. Did I say Jack? I meant Al. Anyways, Al takes him to the back and he's like, listen, man, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I need you to go into this, like, I can't remember if it's a pantry type thing, whatever it is. He makes him walk into it. Long story made short, it's all about time traveling, and we want to time travel back to 11/22/63 because that is the JFK assassination. And Al has been set out on a mission himself for the last few years, or however long he's had this diner, because I can't remember, but he's been on a mission of trying to stop the JFK assassination. And he just so happened to stumble upon the fact that his diner has the ability to time travel. And I don't want to reveal too much more, just in case you haven't read the book, but we basically just go on this journey of following Jack, and he is now attempting to see if he can stop the JFK assassination. And I had a lot of questions before I read this book. Like, how is he going to end up doing this? What was going to be like the entire plot of the story? Because how can a book this big just be about a guy time traveling back to this date to stop an assassination? Like, what more is going to happen? There's so much more that happens. We follow him over the course of quite some time, and it is just so cool. The time traveling aspect, how that works, how time works in real life versus when he's time traveling, just the entire book itself was just so beautifully done. It is just such a fun journey to go on. It does have a subplot of romance. It does have some hard, sad moments in it, but this book is so good and so worth the read. I was very intimidated by this book, but I'm very happy that I have read it. So my next big book by Stephen King is going to be It, and that sounds really scary because that's almost 1,000 pages, if not 1,000 pages and more. I can't really remember, but Anthony is still reading that book, so once he is done, next October, It, You Are Mine. All right, guys, that is it. Those are all of the books that I have read this year that were my favorites. If you have read any of these books or a favorite of yours was on this list, drop it down below. What was your favorite book of 2024? That is my question to you. But I will catch you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.